the crushing weight in my chest, the sound of tearing clothing. I snapped into a reality that was infinitely more complex. I wasn't floating in a cloud. I wasn't looking at a pearly gate. And if you understand what I saw, it will completely shatter the way you view every single person on this earth. I have spent the last 35 years of my life measuring the exact fabric of reality. I am a 60-year-old quantum physicist. I have worked in the most advanced particle accelerator laboratories on this planet. I know exactly how atoms collide, how light bends, and how subatomic particles behave. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that everything we are doing down here is a complete illusion. I remember the exact moment my physical body expired, the crushing weight in my chest, the chaotic shouting of my graduate students fading into a hollow echo. I was experiencing a massive widowmaker heart attack right in the middle of my own laboratory. I was clinically dead. But instead of the infinite dark I had mathematically promised myself, I was suddenly awake. But here is what most people miss about death. It doesn't dissolve your intelligence. It magnifies it 1 trillion times over. My rational, deeply analytical mind was screaming in the silence. Wait a minute. I am a strict empiricist. I don't believe in the soul. I believe in math. If my brain is completely deprived of oxygen, what exact mechanism is processing this thought right now? I was about to find out. Because in the next 6 minutes of Flatline, I wasn't just shown the afterlife. I was shown the exact blueprint of creation. I was shown the terrifying, beautiful truth behind the greatest mystery in modern physics, quantum entanglement. And if you understand what I saw, it will completely shatter the way you view every single person on this earth. But to understand the profound secret of the universe, you have to understand the stubborn, arrogant man I was before it broke me. Up until that Tuesday, I was the ultimate academic cynic. I viewed human consciousness as a biological accident, a random misfire of neurons. You are born, your cells divide, you run out of energy, and your system powers down. Game over. I was a man who worshipped data. I dismissed spirituality as a fairy tale for people who didn't understand calculus. I was terrified of aging, so I buried myself in my work. I treated my colleagues with disdain. I treated my own existence as nothing more than a temporary equation to be solved. If you had told me that the universe was made of love, I would have laughed in your face. But reality has a very brutal, very efficient way of correcting your perspective. It was a normal afternoon. I was standing in front of a whiteboard, arguing with a colleague over a data discrepancy from our latest collision test. The mundane reality of my life, the smell of dry erase markers, the hum of the ventilation system, the stiffness in my lower back was entirely consuming me. Then the invisible sledgehammer hit my chest. The transition from an untouchable intellectual to a dying animal on a linoleum floor takes exactly 1 second. I remember the paralyzing left arm pain. I remember the taste of metallic adrenaline. I didn't lose consciousness immediately, and that was the true horror. If you don't understand the mechanics of cardiac arrest, you don't know how terrifying it is to watch your own biological systems systematically fail. I had a left anterior descending artery occlusion, complete blockage. My heart muscle was suffocating. I could feel the cold dampness of my skin as my blood pressure collapsed. By the time the paramedics strapped me to the gurney, my vision was narrowing into a dark, blurry tunnel. They rushed me to the nearest emergency room. The sterile, terrifying reality of a code blue is not like the movies. It is violent, it is wildly bright, it is full of the smell of ozone from the defibrillator and the sound of tearing clothing. The attending ER doctor, a woman whose name tag I could barely focus on, shouted for epinephrine. I felt the cold rush of drugs entering my vein. As a scientist, I braced myself for the final chemical shutdown of my biological computer. I waited for the math to end. But the math didn't end, it just changed languages. Instead of fading out, the frantic shouting and the harsh hospital lights began to stretch and blur. I was drifting out of the crushing agony in my chest. I snapped into a reality that was infinitely more complex, more dense, and more vibrant than anything I had ever measured in my lab. I wasn't floating in a cloud. I wasn't looking at a pearly gate. I woke up suspended in a vast, infinite, geometric grid of living, breathing light. Because my brain was wired to understand the universe through physics, that is exactly how the Creator translated it to me. I was standing inside the actual, literal fabric of quantum mechanics, and in an instant, The greatest mystery of my career was solved. In physics, we have something called quantum entanglement. It's when two particles become connected, and what happens to one instantly happens to the other, even if they are billions of light years apart. Albert Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. He hated it because it proved that space and time were illusions. I looked around this vast, glowing grid, and I realized with sudden, breathtaking clarity, quantum entanglement isn't just a physical property. It is the baseline code of the spiritual universe. But here is what shifted my entire paradigm. The grid wasn't made of dead math. It was made of pure, unconditional, overwhelming love. I looked down at myself. I no longer had a physical body, yet I was entirely myself. I was a concentrated point of awareness, and all around me were billions of brilliant nodes of light, connected by shimmering, golden threads of energy. I realized that every single node was a soul, and every thread was a relationship, a word spoken, a kindness given, or a pain inflicted, and the entire structure was pulsing and breathing and reacting instantly to everything. I felt a presence beside me. It wasn't a human figure. It was a localized density of pure, condensed intelligence and compassion. It felt like standing in front of a massive, roaring fireplace on a freezing winter night, the heat and the acceptance just radiating entirely through my core. It communicated with me, not with words, but with instant downloaded blocks of absolute knowing. It told me, "Welcome home. You have always been connected. You never left." I wept. The arrogant physicist was completely gone, shattered by the undeniable gravity of this connection. I asked the presence, if we are all perfectly connected up here, then why do we go to Earth? Why do we blind ourselves down there? The answer to that question completely dismantled everything I thought I knew about human suffering. The presence showed me a visual representation of Earth, but it wasn't a blue planet. It was a localized, heavy density field. The entity explained to me that Earth is a crucible. It is a highly specialized, intensely compressed simulation. Because we are perfectly connected in the eternal realm, we cannot truly understand what it means to choose love, because love is the default state. To truly learn, to truly grow, we have to go somewhere where the connection is hidden. We come to Earth to experience the illusion of separation. We put on these heavy biological suits. We forget who we are, and we stumble around in the dark, hurting each other, just so we can remember how to find the light. Your life is not a random biological accident. It is an incredibly brave, intentional mission. The weight of this realization was staggering. I looked at the entity, and I felt a profound sense of peace wash over me. I finally understood the math of the universe. I was ready to stay. I was ready to dissolve into this beautiful, warm network of truth. But the entity gently pushed back. It is time for you to go back. You have the equation now. You have to translate this for them. I pitched an absolute fit. The arrogant scientist came back for just a second. I screamed into the expanse. I am not going back to that broken body. I don't want to go back to the Crucible. Let me stay. But the entity laid an energetic weight on where my chest would be, and with a violent, terrifying rush of speed, I was sent falling backward through the void. I woke up in the trauma bay screaming. I wasn't screaming from the physical agony of my ribs, which had been cracked during CPR. I was screaming because I was so incredibly angry to be back in the heavy, dense, isolating suit of physical flesh. An attending nurse rushed over, literally dropping a tray of as my eyes snapped open. "Where is it?" I kept yelling. "The grid, the entanglement, I want to go back." Now, you might be thinking exactly what my colleagues thought. You might be thinking, he suffered severe brain hypoxia. His dying brain dumped a massive cocktail of DMT to comfort him. It was just a chemical hallucination. I tried to convince myself of that, once my rational mind kicked back online, days later, in the ICU, until the ER doctor walked into my room. She stood at the foot of my bed, reviewing my chart. I looked her dead in the eye and recounted perfectly, word for word, the frantic command she gave to the nurse while I was completely flatlined. I described the exact way she pushed her hair out of her face with her forearm because her gloves were bloody. I had no heartbeat. I had zero electrical activity in my brain. I was legally dead. Yet I had seen and heard everything from a vantage point hovering near the ceiling tiles. The doctor sat down slowly. She couldn't explain it medically, but she didn't deny it, because the proof was sitting right in front of her. It took me months to recover physically. It took me years to recover spiritually. I could have gone back to my old life. I could have completely denied the experience, kept my mouth shut, and kept writing my safe, predictable academic papers. Instead, I resigned from my laboratory. I completely shifted the trajectory of my remaining years. I know now that we are not biological machines living in a random, meaningless universe. We are eternal nodes of light, currently inhabiting a physical crucible. Everything you do, every interaction you have, sends an instantaneous ripple across that quantum network. You are entangling with people energetically before you ever even speak to them. I don't have all the answers. I am still a flawed student in this classroom. I still get frustrated. I still experience pain. But I am no longer driven by the fear of death, because I know that death is just taking off a tight shoe. If we want to change this world, we have to stop looking at each other as separate physical objects and start realizing we are pulling on the exact same strings. If this story shifted your perspective on life, physics, and what comes next, do me a favor. Leave a comment below about a time you felt that undeniable, invisible connection to someone else. It helps to know we aren't alone in this realization. And if you want to keep exploring the space between life and death every single week, hit subscribe.